Well, welcome to the Agents of Movement webinar for July. I am joined by Megan Williamson. She's somebody who I have a lot of respect for in the adaptive fitness space. So I'm really excited to have her here doing a webinar with you all. She's done an article for Agents of Movement newsletter, but I wanted to have her back for a webinar. A little bit about Megan. She specializes in working with people with neurological disabilities and helping them through their post-rehab fitness journey. She's an active member of the adaptive fitness community and can be found running adaptive boot camps, training events for spinal cord injury BC, and dance classes through BC Wheelchair Basketball. She also creates one-on-one customized sports programs for adaptive athletes who are training in sports like wheelchair rugby, floorball, and wheelchair basketball. Megan's most recent venture has been the creation of the course Breaking Barriers: Fundamentals for training clients with physical disabilities, which is the course providing other fitness professionals awareness and skills to successfully coach those with physical disabilities. She's also written a book, Breaking Barriers, which I have, and it can be purchased on Amazon, and there will be a link provided in the follow-up email. So thank you all for joining us, and Megan, I will let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. It's great to be here. I'm going to get right into it because I want to save time for questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen and I will just make sure everyone can see this. Everyone's good? Okay, perfect. Cool. So today's topic, 3 shifts that improve outcomes in adaptive fitness. So I can see some of you, if you work with anyone with a disability right now in your current work, can you raise your hand? Any type of disability? No? Yep. Okay. So, sort of, Catherine said sort of. Okay. Also, I forgot to say too, utilize the chat if there's something you need clarification on throughout this. I think Erin's going to be monitoring it. I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, we will have time at the end for other questions. Okay, so this is like great if you're working with clients with disabilities. Great if you're not, also great. This is going to give you some good insight. I've been doing this for quite a while. I train a lot of trainers how to work with clients with disabilities. So these are some of the 3 shifts that I see can make the biggest improvement with your work with clients, whether you're a coach, a kinesiologist, group fitness instructor, yoga instructor, etc. Okay. So we already introduced myself, so I'm gonna skip this here. But let's go into who this might be for. So like I said, if you work with older adults or clients with chronic or neurological conditions. So please remember, older aging adults are also and can be people with disabilities, right? There's lots of things that happen as we age, including losing our range of motion, arthritis, right? Pain, that's one of the biggest aspects of disability around the world is pain, right? So that can happen with older aging adults. This can also be if you've had a client with a disability and you felt unsure of how hard to push them. And because we have fear, we don't want to push someone too much, right? And we also don't want to do too little. And we'll talk a lot about that later. This is for you if you want to be more confident. And once again, with any type of client, just adapting. Sometimes we get clients with acute injuries and we have to adapt on the fly sometimes. So this can be for you. This can be for if you want your clients with disabilities to feel successful and safe in your session. So what I mean about that is some disabilities are degenerative and we don't necessarily have diagnoses. And as we all know as coaches, exercise and working out can help, but it doesn't mean we can cure that disability that they're working with. So how do we make someone feel successful in a session when they're dealing with symptoms and things that are going to eventually get progressively worse, right? And this is also for you if you believe fitness should be accessible to everyone, which is one of my biggest beliefs, and this is why I teach. So by the time we're done today, the hope is that you will understand these 3 secrets that I think can make a huge difference in your work. Number 1 is the key mistake movement professionals make when they assume. So one of the things, if you totally zone out on this webinar today, and there's only one thing you can take away, it would be that we're not going to assume anymore. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Why so many exercise programs fail clients with disabilities, even when the exercises are, and I put quotations around this, correct. Okay, we're going to dive into that. And secret 3, a simple shift in coaching and programming that helps clients with disabilities progress safely and consistently. Okay, so let's get into it. So now more than ever, to be truly effective and inclusive, movement professionals need the skills to confidently support clients with disabilities. So people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world, period. And it is actually 22% in Canada and 18% in the US. So this is the largest minority group in the world. And so when these individuals are coming into our fitness spaces and they don't feel like they can get helped, or they don't feel like they belong there, this can be bad for A, your business, and B, everyone that we care about as coaches, right? So having and educating yourself with these little small shifts, whether it's in your assessment, in your actual programming, in your coaching, it can absolutely transform your client's experience. And this can lead to greater independence of your client, their confidence, it can increase their quality of life, and it can build your business. And that's essentially how I built mine, right? So many professionals were not taught how to adapt in these types of areas. A lot of the certification programs we take, especially in the PT space, doesn't teach a lot of this stuff. It's all assumed that the person is considered well and able-bodied, and that's just not the case. That's most people aren't that. So today, that's why we're going to break these down. Okay. So a little bit about how I got into this. If I move this sidebar, can we all still see the picture? Okay, nobody can see that. Okay, perfect. So early in my career, so I started this work because I literally was faced with a client with a disability. She had cerebral palsy, which for those of you that don't know is a neurological disability that the person is born with. So it's considered congenital. So it's not something that gets better. It's not something that necessarily gets worse. It's something that the client lives with. And I was working at Equinox in LA. I was one of the top coaches there at that club, top performers. And I got this new client and she had cerebral palsy, and I absolutely froze because I did not know what to do with her. I had no education on disability. All I saw was her barriers. I saw her cane. I saw that she was walking with a bit of a limp, kind of dragging her foot, a little bit of that like circumduction action in the hip. She told me all the things that she was told she can't do. And that's what I focused on because I didn't know any better. So I played it really safe. And my mentality was, how can I program for this woman in a way that allows her to do things and so she's safe? But that mindset isn't a growth mindset, and it's not pushing her in ways that she could be pushed because I didn't know how to assess her. So there wasn't progress. We were just staying in this like safety box so that I didn't hurt her or like do something that made her feel bad because I didn't know. I didn't know. And I actually lost that client because eventually she got bored. She didn't feel challenged. And I honestly just didn't know enough with this demographic. So that was the moment for me that shifted. And that's when I knew I had to start making some changes if I wanted to be a coach for anyone that walked through my door. So we went over these three, okay, or we went into, let's go into depth of these three things we're going to cover. So the first secret is looking beyond the diagnosis and equipment, okay? So understanding what to assess instead. So we're going to jump into that. Number 2 is going to be programming for real life, okay? Why even well-designed exercises can fail. And number 3, we can kind of phrase it as well, coach the session, not just the exercise. We can also phrase it as coach the individual, not just the exercise. Okay, so we'll dive into that as well. So let's start with number 1. Okay, so looking beyond diagnosis and equipment. So this is where this assumption comes in. So a lot of times with coaching, if somebody comes in with a disability, physical disability specifically, they may or may not be using some type of mobility device. They may or may not be moving a different way than maybe we would be. And sometimes that can cause us to assume that there are limitations. Okay, so in here, wheelchair, that's like one of the really common ones. So I've seen coaches where someone comes up in a wheelchair, and I'm not giving you any detail on if they use that wheelchair full time, if they use it all the time, none of that, but a coach will see the wheelchair, and a lot of times assume that okay, they're bound to this wheelchair. They can't do much else. They can't walk, right? And these are all assumptions. And this actually just isn't true. Most people that use wheelchairs actually get around other ways as well. That's going to be getting comfortable with understanding disability and the certain disabilities that we can see in the world. One of my clients has Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. This is a very rare type of muscular dystrophy. And she, because it's a congenital disease, she uses a wheelchair, but she also uses a power chair. And the power chair, for those of you that don't know, is the one that's power operated with a joystick. So it can go quite quick. You're not having to manually wheel yourself. She'll use that on her really high fatigue days. But sometimes she can walk with just her AFOs on, which are kind of like a leg brace. So she's all over the place, and that's normal for her. And she will have days where she's up and needing a lot of support, and then she'll have days where she's solid and she can walk on her own. So if I was to assume that first day with her when she comes in, and that day, whatever mobility device she's using, that could really hurt her program, because now I'm assuming that she can't ever do sit to stands. She doesn't need to work on ankle mobility. She doesn't need to work on balance, right? So seeing some of these mobility devices, there's a really big common thing happening where coaches just all of a sudden decide and assume. And we need to open our eyes up to that and right away just getting curious. And this is where the assessment can be really fun, because that's when you can start asking these questions, right? Another example would be MS. So does anyone in here, we've heard of multiple sclerosis, all of us in here? Okay, so a big symptom of MS is weakness, right? Because of the lesions in the brain and the spinal cord. So it can slow those neural connections down or stop them. This is only a symptom. It doesn't mean it's with everyone, right? Some people have MS, they've been diagnosed with MS, and they are out running marathons, right? Because they are at that stage where it might be early onset, or they have the type of MS where it's not quite into primary progressive yet, right? So if let's say we take a call with a client and they're like, oh, I want to work with you, I have MS, we have to open our mind and not assume they're going to show up and have a lot of weakness, because that is absolutely not true, even though that is a symptom. So the point I'm getting at with this is to not get caught up on a diagnosis, right? Because that can limit us as coaches, and that can then limit your client, right? Adaptive equipment, another thing. So a lot of gyms offer adaptive equipment. I've created a toolkit. I call it the adaptive toolkit. I didn't create the things in it, but it's a toolkit that you can get for your facility. A lot of the community centers here in the Lower Mainland, where I live in Vancouver, are starting to equip their facilities with these toolkits. And it's essentially a really accessible way to enhance the gym equipment that people already have, so that people with physical disabilities can start using the equipment better. So an example would be if anyone's heard of like the Hook Grips or Active Hands, which are awesome for anyone that has like weak or compromised grip, which would be like anyone who's a quadriplegic, could be someone with MS, someone with arthritis, anything like that, older aging adult. These toolkits, they can use these and then still be able to participate and work in the gym, right? But the thing is sometimes when we think someone needs adaptive equipment, we think, oh, they must be really limited, right? But really, adaptive equipment allows us to do more. And this is the mindset as coaches that we want to have. We don't want to think of limitations, but we want to think of all the things now that we can and open this individual's world in the gym with, now that we have all these tools. Okay, so another really good example of this is for spinal cord injury. So I don't know if anyone in here is familiar on how you categorize spinal cord injury, but essentially wherever the spinal cord injury level is on an individual, it starts with that level of the spine. So if, let's say, someone broke their neck at cervical level 5, they would be considered a quad C5, okay? And let's say they're incomplete, which means they still have some intact spinal cord below the injury level. So they may still be able to walk. They still may be able to feel their feet, right? There's some incomplete motor and sensory below the injury level. If they were complete, it would mean they have nothing below the injury level. But if they're incomplete, the sky's the limit. We don't know what they're working with, right? So if I get a client over here who's considered a C5 incomplete and they run, I get this other client over here who's a C5 incomplete. They may be in a wheelchair and not be able to stand. So this is where if we just hear the diagnosis, that doesn't help us much as coaches. We do need to break that down, see how the individual moves, and ask questions, right? So what do we assess instead, right? So in the assessment, right? So there's a lot of things that you can assess once you understand what the person's working with. These examples here, MS, SCI is just short for spinal cord injury, CP, cerebral palsy, which I mentioned before, stroke. So there's certain symptoms that we can understand about these disabilities that will help you with your programming. And one of them for these 4 listed is spasticity. So spasticity is something that can happen with these individuals with neurological conditions. And why it's important that we know that is because we can train it. So when someone's undertrained and they're not moving a lot and their body feels unsafe in a lot of positions, this can create an increase in spasticity. If they exercise and they increase their range of motion of their joints safely, this can help with spasticity levels, right? So that's an example of where we are familiar with a little bit of these disabilities. We can start asking the right questions. Do you have spasticity? What makes you what makes your muscles more spastic? Where do you have it? Are you sensitive to the cold? That can be one, right? An example with these as well, balance issues. So we can assume, you know, balance issues, once we know about these disabilities, balance issues are going to be really common in neurological disability and disease. So we can start assessing balance, right? Fatigue is another one. And these are just examples, right? In our course, we give a cheat sheet with all of these listed. So every disability, what the common disabilities, I think we go over 7 in detail. And then we list all of these symptoms that you can train if you know about them and you learn those skills. So it can be a really helpful assessment tool when you take on these clients, right? Instead of just seeing a barrier and then avoiding it, because that's not going to help the client, right? And that's not going to make them feel like they're going to progress with you. Okay, so task specific is a good one. So we probably all do this anyways with clients. If you have a client that wants to garden and they're like, you know what, I'm training with you because I love gardening in the summer and my back kind of hurts sometimes when I bend over and pull weeds, right? So we know, okay, well, you know, a coach might say, let me see you do that. Let's see how you're bending over, right? Because it might be something in their mechanics we can work with. They're probably not deadlifting. They're probably bending over with a round spine, right? And doing that constant movement. So somebody with a disability, it's not different. Ask them, what are your day to day? Are you, you know, maybe they say I'm having a hard time transferring from my wheelchair to the bed. Okay, show me, right? Let's break it down. We can look at those things. Maybe it's an older aging adult. I have a hard time getting off the toilet seat without using a grab bar, which makes it really hard because none of my family has grab bars in their homes. Okay, let's see it. That's a sit to stand. So assess it. Start looking at that and start working with what they're doing in their day to day. And that's a really good place to start. Okay. Functional assessments, pretty similar, but don't forget, just because someone is using a mobility device, we still want to look at the joint function. So if somebody's using a wheelchair, we still need to look at their hips, right? They may not be standing all the time, or they may not be weight bearing, but we all know, think of our desk jockey clients that sit at desks all day, kind of like we're doing right now, but they do it all day, every day for 7, 8 hours, maybe longer, 5 days a week. And then they see us and they're like, oh man, my back hurts. You know, my glutes, I feel like I have no glutes. My hip flexors hurt. That's all really similar to people that are using wheelchairs, because they are going to get those tight hip flexors, underactive glutes, tight hamstrings, sore neck, right? So we can start looking at that stuff and helping increase range of motion in those joints and creating healthier movement, so that, because then that affects like the spine and how they stand and how they reach and how they pull and how they push. So these are all places we can start when we're assessing these individuals. Any questions so far? No, we're good? Okay. Okay, secret 2. So program for real life. What does this mean? That seems pretty broad, right? So why even a well-designed exercise program can fail. So I'm just going to give you an example of a client I do have. So he's an incomplete quadriplegic. So he's broken his neck at C7. He plays wheelchair rugby, and he drives. If anyone knows what a Dodge Durango is, so it's like a kind of a big like SUV truck, and he has it raised. He's a car guy, so he has it raised, so it's high. So he uses a manual wheelchair. So you can imagine, oh, is he transferring into that? Yes, he is. So this is important to him, right? He's transferring from a low manual wheelchair to this high Dodge Durango. He does it, right? But this is something he does in his day-to-day. So let's say he comes in and we're going to do an upper body workout, and I'm going to push him really hard, and we're going to do lots of pulling, lots of pushing, lots of pressing, right? Because he isn't weight bearing, so we're probably not going to do much strength for his lower body. But little do I know, because I didn't ask him, he has to go now and transfer into that Durango after his workout. And then he has to go to rugby, and you transfer into a rugby chair. And then I don't know if any of you have seen wheelchair rugby, amazing game. Absolutely look it up. He has to go in his wheelchair rugby chair. Practices are 2+ hours. It's like bumper cars out there. So he's pounding into other people, might fall, right? And then he has to transfer out when he's exhausted, get back in his Durango, drive home, get out of the Durango. You see what I'm getting at, right? That would absolutely like kill this individual. He might not do a safe transfer into his car. So sometimes we can get all excited and like if I go take a CrossFit class and I kill my legs, I will survive, right? I will survive. I might be sore, I might complain about it, but I can essentially probably walk to my car and drive and get around. But somebody who might only be using their core the core they have, which will be compromised, and their upper body, they are using that to get around like we do with our legs. So we need to look at their entire day before we create a program and assume that that's the only thing they're doing that day, because I promise you it isn't. Things are going to be a little bit more challenging. Muscle groups are going to be used more. Overtraining, not from training sessions, but overtraining, just overuse injuries are really common, especially if people are using crutches or walkers or canes or wheelchairs. So we need to consider the energy cost, look at the bigger picture of their life. So maybe that means not training on the day they have a bunch of sports, right? Maybe that means changing your push to pull ratios. And I'll say this right now, any of my clients using chairs, I do a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 pulls to every 1 push exercise, period. Because they are pushing all day in their manual chair. Even if they're not using a manual chair, the transfer they would be doing is probably a push, right? Hardly are we ever pulling in that lifestyle, right? When you're using those mobility devices. The only time I would increase the push is if they're playing a wheelchair sport and they need it. Okay. Plinth work is another one. So if you know your client is, let's say they're using a wheelchair or a scooter or something like that, and they're sitting a lot of the time, we probably want to get them out of their chair if they can, right? So a plinth is just a raised mat. Some of us might not have access to that. I use it with clients that can't transfer to the floor because it's a lot easier for them to get to the mat, right? It's about wheelchair height. Massage table, some people have at gyms, you might have something else at your place, or maybe your client gets to the floor. But essentially the plinth work or being on a mat is so good for spine health and the hips, and it creates safety for the body, right? So things like that we want to consider in the session, programming for their real life. In terms of safety and consideration, so physical, mental, and neurological fatigue. So this is another thing. When we start to get working with clients with specific disabilities, and this is also the disabilities I won't be really talking about today, but we want to consider things like autism, right? Asperger's, anyone on the spectrum, anything like that. People can be really sensitive to like lots of lights and movements and noise, and that can drastically affect your work with this individual. I have a couple clients with MS who, when they're in the main area of where we work out at the hospital, it's like a gym in the hospital. It's like hospital lighting, so it's super ugly and bright, like crazy bright lights. There's research posters all over the walls. They're playing music. There's a lot going on, and it can be very overstimulating. So I tend to take those clients into the yoga room where there's not a lot on the walls. We can dim the lights, and their performance of what I ask them to do is like 10 times better, because they are able to concentrate and they don't have all this overwhelm happening. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So this is where like on paper a program looks really good, but then you get it in front of that individual and there's all these other like things that are kind of coming into play that we need to consider. And we might not know what those are until we talk to the client, right? And this is why those assessment pieces are so important. Okay, just a little example here. This is a client I worked with online for many years. This was a while ago when he wrote me this testimonial. But I saw him directly out of rehab. He actually lives in New York. We work online, and we did a lot of this stuff. We worked in his basement where he had no distractions. You know, we progressed really slowly. We focused on a lot of functional things. I asked to see his goals were getting back to skiing. His goals were getting back to running. I asked for videos of everything, like show me where you're at, show me what you're doing now. And within time, he was starting to see and build strength. And now he can actually balance on his unicycle, which is crazy, like so awesome. So he works really hard. But just an example of some of this stuff in play and how it can benefit a client. Okay, the last secret, coach the session or coach the person, not just the exercise. So what this means. So let's start with language. Language is a really big thing right now, in a sense that it is forever changing. And there's a reason for it. Language is important. It's how we communicate, and we can create a safe space with language, and we can also create a space that doesn't feel so good. And this is for everyone. This is probably for all of us as well. So in general, I'm saying this in general because it differs around the world, but if most of us are here in North America, excuse me, using persons first language is considered the most respectful. And what that means is we put the person first and then the disability second. So saying a person with a disability, excuse me, as opposed to disabled person. Do we hear the difference? So disabled person is identity first because we put disabled before person. Person with a disability is putting the person first. And why people find this more respectful is because they want to be recognized as the person, not the disability they're working with, right? I'm so sorry. Excuse me. So in general, this is going to be your go-to. There are some exceptions. If any of us have heard of the deaf community, right? We've probably heard it called the deaf community. There's a reason for that. People who are deaf are proud. They are proud to be a part of the deaf community. So deaf community is identity first. And that is highly acceptable to that community. And I'm not telling you this to confuse you more, but I'm telling you to start being aware of the language that we use. So like I would avoid saying my MS client, right? It's not my MS client, it's my client who has MS, right? So just being aware of that language, start noticing if you hear the difference around you in your spaces or when you read or anything like that, okay? And it just sets a tone for trust and respect. Positioning. So what I mean by this, I don't mean positioning of like equipment necessarily, but positioning of your client, allowing them to make, to give some input and have choices. And why this is important is because if you consider a client who might be working with a degenerative disease like MS or a congenital disease like cerebral palsy. A lot of these individuals are told no a lot of the times. And they're also not given a lot of options, and they're just kind of told what they need to do next. Take this drug, go to this doctor, get this scan, do this, do that, do this. And that can cause a lot of fatigue. And it can also cause a lot of almost like they don't feel like they have any control anymore in their life. And this is real feedback that I get from clients. So even if it's something little, like, here's our cardio options today. Would you rather do adaptive split ropes, or would you rather do the SciFit? What are you feeling today? Even something like that, you're still programming and you're still supporting them. But that choice can give so much more than you might know. And it allows that individual to be a part of the process, and it allows them to build confidence and ownership with what they're doing and their relationship to exercise and you. And it can allow them to enjoy it more, because sometimes exercise is a scary thing, especially for people with disability. So this is a really easy thing that we can kind of consider when we're having our sessions. And this might not be with just people with disabilities. This is good advice in general, I think, for a lot of people, because exercise and seeking out a coach for a lot of people is hard. They do it, but not everybody wants to be there, right? So something that we can consider. And then small adjustments. So there is, I don't want to say never, but I try when I'm using adaptive pieces or equipment or anything to adjust a client, I try and not use the word like regression and progression, because we don't want people to think that they're not able to do more than they could, like thinking, oh, we're going to downplay this for you because you can't do it. But also because sometimes regressions are progressions, right? So for example, if I have a client who has a compromised trunk, they have MS, and they're losing a bit of their core function because they have lesions at that area that innervates their core, and they're doing an overhead, let's say they're doing an overhead ball press or something, and they're kind of all over the place. They're like not getting their balance, their neck is straining, right? I might decide to put a chest strap on them, like just a neoprene chest strap, which is one of the pieces in our toolkit, and get them anywhere online, right? And that will set them up and stabilize their lower body. So now they can do a chest press. They're not having to rely so much on core. And because I programmed this exercise to improve their shoulders and get their heart rate up, we're not regressing anything. We're just setting them up so they have more stability, so they can now do a better job of the exercise, right? So that wouldn't be a regression. That's just us adapting so that we can get a better outcome and they get more out of the exercise, right? Any questions on Secret 3? No? Okay. So let's dive a little deeper. Put up your hand if you've heard of this word, neuroplasticity. Yeah? Okay. So I'll explain it anyways, just in case there's people watching this that aren't sure. But neuroplasticity is essentially understanding that our brain is plastic and we can change our brain. It is not set to be the static like we used to think it was, which I find fascinating that we used to think that. It is plastic, which is great, which means we can learn new things and we can learn new ways of movement. And that's what we're doing, especially with adaptive work. We are essentially creating new neural pathways to learn or perform a movement in a different way, right? But it takes more than just movement. We can't have a conversation. I can't talk to my client and have a conversation and have them do an exercise and expect neuroplasticity to happen. It takes a lot of mind-body connection. It takes very clear cues from you as a coach and active engagement. So it can be fatiguing because a lot of times people don't work out with intention. They don't always work out with intention. It's really easy to just like get reps done and just do it. But when we're actually working with intention, mind-muscle connection, focusing on simplified, clear cues, and repetition, that's how we can make a really big difference. And that's essentially what we're doing with all of our clients. If we're teaching them how to move well, we're essentially like we're creating a space for neuroplasticity to happen. But we just want to make sure that we're doing it at the best way, because otherwise it will never get there, or we won't get there as quick. So another thing that can help with speeding up neuroplasticity is celebrating micro wins, right? So if your client has adapted a cue you gave them, and they've improved one piece of that exercise you gave them, maybe it's not perfect, but you're already seeing change, or they're able to focus more, or maybe they got out 5 reps with good form instead of 3, right? That we want to celebrate that, because that tells the brain, right, and the nervous system, it primes it to keep learning because we're getting better feedback, that individual is. So celebrating micro wins is great. You can do it in any way you like. I love high fives. I give high fives to clients all the time. It's a great dopamine booster. Some people will cheer, whatever you want to do. Great work. You don't want to be fake about it, but do what you do as a coach, but just know that those little micro wins are helping your client along the way. Okay. And then once again, I mentioned this, but cueing for clarity, not complexity. When we start stacking all these cues on top of each other, it can burn your client out, and the neuroplasticity will not happen. So we have to be very specific. Start simple. Even if you think it's too simple, you're better to start with 1, because if you add a second and you see things fall apart, that was too much for them. They can't handle the 2. So you can just back it off a little bit. And that's just working with the client. You'll learn that, what their limits are, right? And as they continue and progress, then you can start stacking. Okay, so another testimonial of this work, Yasmin. So she came to me, she was a brand new mom. You can see her baby there. She's a higher level quadriplegic. I believe she's complete. She's not weight bearing. But we worked very slowly on some of her transfers, very meticulously. I was very strict with her form. We did a lot of repetition. Her programs were like 8 to 12 weeks at a time, and she started seeing improvements in her posture, and even her physio was commenting on it. So this is just another example of where taking that third secret, where you can implement that into sessions, and you're going to see results from that. Okay, so let's dive into a couple case studies here. With respect to the first point we made, looking beyond the diagnosis, an example of how this could not be good is if like a trainer works with a client with CP. This is actually the example I gave you at the beginning. So this was like me with my client that I got at Equinox. I got a bit scared of the cane. I just saw everything like that she might have challenges with. She told me what she could do and the things she can't do. And I didn't really explore beyond that. So it lost me the client, but more importantly, it was assumptions on my part, which limited her ability to improve, because I didn't know how to fully assess. I didn't really know at the time. I wasn't as experienced. I didn't have experience with disability. And so this is an example where the diagnosis was kind of more what I was caught up on, and I didn't follow through with any functional assessment. And that hurt me as a coach, and it hurt my client, right? With regards to coaching for real life, here's an example of a client with MS. So Emily's 38-year-old client, she has MS, so diagnosed roughly, average age of onset, fully ambulatory, which means she walks, but she does experience fatigue, which is a symptom, intermittent weakness, and heat sensitivity during exercise, which is another common one with MS. So we look at this first sentence, and it's really easy to think, okay, MS, right? Here's the things that we can associate with it. Fine, that's fine. Notice how there's intermittent weakness in there, but these would be things that we obviously would have found out from the assessment. So these things might fluctuate though, right? Because it's not always going to be hot, right? She might be fine on days where she's not hot. She might be fine when there's AC on, or in the winter, if she has layers on and she brings those to the session, right? So it's not all the time. So during the session, we can look at all these things like the pacing, environmental factors, anything that fluctuates, and that's information for you as a coach. But we don't want to assume that these symptoms that we always have that are associated with MS are already immediately going to be with Emily, because that might not be true. So we would look and see what symptoms we're dealing with, right? Asking the questions, noticing the changes if you've been working with them for a while, and adapting your session with response to those symptoms, not response to the diagnosis. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah? Okay. So it's once again, it's the point I'm getting at. Yes, it's helpful to have some information and education on some of these disabilities. Yes, it is. But it's more importantly how we respond. That's what's more important. We don't need to know all of the ins and outs of every disability to be a successful coach. It is more about how you respond, right? Okay, and then the last case study, I am watching the time, Erin. Coach the session or the person, not the exercise. So here, small adjustments. So let's say a trainer is working with a client who uses a walker. I didn't really specify their disability. It doesn't really matter in this case. But execution in the session was inconsistent. So maybe it wasn't the exercise selection itself, but maybe it's the setup, right? And the real-time coaching adjustment. So maybe it's getting really locked into the program that you wrote, but that person is showing up differently that day, right? Maybe they had a really stressful week, or maybe they had a fall yesterday and you didn't know about it. Because how many clients have I had that hide some of that stuff, and then I see a massive bruise on them and I have to ask, and they say, oh yeah, no big deal, I had a fall. It's like, okay, we need to reassess where we're at today, right? So communication. And once you start working with them and you start working with the person in front of you and not the program, that's when you'll start seeing more client confidence and you'll start seeing more success because you're working with the individual. Okay, so these are the 3 things we just went through. So when you put these 3 together, this might have been a lot for some of us. This might have just been nice reminders for some of us. But when you put these all together and we get away from being caught up in a mobility device or a diagnosis or the word disability or anything like that, the assessment definitely changes what we see, because it's not about the diagnosis, it's about symptoms and how we can train those, right? How can we train those? How can we train the person in front of us? The diagnosis doesn't really matter when you get to that level, right? Programming changes what you plan. So when you work with disabilities, I will say you're going to be changing things a lot because things happen. And this is the same with quite a lot of people, even older aging adults, people dealing with invisible disabilities. I haven't even talked about that until now, but people with mental health issues, depression, anything like that, you might be changing things on the fly. So we need to be understanding and assessing who is in front of us, right? And coaching the changes of what is actually happening. Okay, and what does this change for you as a coach? Because I think sometimes we come in and we go, I don't know where to start with a client with a disability. So when you put these 3 shifts together, we aren't guessing as much anymore. We have more clarity because it gives you a framework. This gives you a framework from the assessment up until you're doing active sessions with clients and beyond, right? More confidence with adaptive clients. I say adaptive clients, but this is with your everyday anyone client, right? Anyone can be an adaptive client. A lot of people need adaptations at some point or another, right? And more consistent client progress. The thing with this is people who do have disabilities will have a lot more ups and downs and a lot more changes more frequently in their abilities and their programs than somebody who might not identify with having a disability. And that's why this is so important in this space when we start working with clients with disabilities. It's not to say it isn't important otherwise, but it's just going to be magnetized here. Okay. So what actually makes this work? Number 1 is understanding how disability affects movement. So like I said, it's not the be all end all, but if we do have some of that baseline understanding what to expect with each disability, that will help you ask the right questions, right? And that will make your client feel heard. Knowing what to assess beyond diagnosis. So we went through a bit of a very mini version of an outline today. In our course, we go through in depth of some of these assessment tools that we can do. And we actually even have in this book, we actually even have an assessment guide of how to do an intake assessment with a client with a disability, because the PAR-Qs leave out a lot of information, really important information. And connecting assessment to programming coaching decisions. So where do we link it? Why are we asking these questions? Why is it important? And how do we put it in a functional program that is going to help improve your client's quality of life? Because that's ultimately going to be one of the biggest asks or goals of clients, is improving or maintaining quality of life. Okay, so one of our courses that we teach is called Breaking Barriers, and that's where we go into depth on that. And that's essentially what it was built for. So we go into the foundational disability and movement education. Like I mentioned, we talk about 7 of the most common physical disabilities that I see in fitness facilities, and that are probably common around North America or the world. We have practical assessment strategies for people using mobility devices. So in our course, we do very specific actual client case studies. Today we did kind of hypothetical, but we do actual real client case studies so that you can have that practice. And then programming and coaching. Got to move my bar here. How do I move that bar? There we go. Programming and coaching applied to adaptive populations. So what do those look like, and how can we link those, right? And okay, so Arden was a student. I take on a lot of students. We have a lot of students that come in and out of Ocean Rehab, and they do that so that they can prep themselves for physio school, or maybe they're finishing their kin degree, or they come onto our team and they end up working with me. So Arden was one that took our Breaking Barriers course, and she was already working as a coach, but this absolutely built her confidence with specific disabilities. And she's now working as a kinesiologist specializing with disabilities. So this kind of like helped her jump off and create her own fitness journey as a coach, coaching and specializing, and not just offering to people that are identified as able-bodied, but she's starting to specialize now, as I do. So that's really exciting. So some of the benefits that people can get from that course. Okay, so I'm going to save time for questions. I'm a minute out of my timing that I promised I would end at, so that's great. But before I leave, if anyone is interested in learning more, or they want to sign up for our course, you do get continuing education credits for it if you're a personal trainer. It is recognized through ACE, NASM, Fitness Alberta, BCRPA, and I believe one more. And if you came here today, or if you get this recording, you get 20% off the course. So I will leave this discount code here, and the course is with this QR code. You can also follow us on Instagram, ocean_rehab. From there, you can also join our newsletter. I like to send out a newsletter once a month, just giving up new blogs, new adaptive fitness tips and tricks, keeping up in the industry of what's happening. Yeah, and otherwise I will hand it over to Erin. I hope everyone was able to have a little bit of a takeaway today, but I will save time for questions as well. So if you have any questions, I will be here. And I will stop. Should I leave this up for you, Erin, or take it down?
Yeah, you can leave it up. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was amazing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your perspective and your human-centered approach. I really love what you said about language. I'm a big one on language. So since we have such a small group, feel free to come off of mute if you have questions. But I appreciate everything that you presented and giving us some ideas on how we can keep it human-centered and people-centered, and the assessments I think are really important. And I was actually going to ask you about that assessment because so many of our assessments are guided on like physical abilities, but like a great example was the guy with a Durango truck, like really understanding their lifestyle and what they are doing and all the movements that they are doing in their life that are important to them, the sports they're involved in. And I think that that's something that can definitely be a part of the assessment. So I don't know if your assessment includes just general lifestyle questions. It's not always about physical abilities. Is that something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the textbook, there's like an assessment guide, and it's kind of like an addition to PAR-Q. And it's a little bit more talking specifically about some of the like medical questions and safety questions that the PARCU will not have on there for someone with a disability. But in the textbook and some of the chapters, we talk about it a little bit more in depth on those lifestyle questions and things to consider, like bigger picture, essentially. Yeah.
Right.
And that textbook is with the course. So if
Okay.
somebody signs up with the course, they get the textbook mailed to them. It's included. So
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. I'll give everyone else a chance to ask questions. I could ask more, but I want to leave it open to who is on the call. Okay. I thought Catherine, you might have come off of you. Okay. No, you're good. Okay. I was like, oh, is she going off or no? Okay. My other question was in regards to group activities for people with disabilities. How do you feel about group activities being successful with those when you have a variety of symptoms and a variety of things going on with individuals?
Yeah, actually. So there's two ways to approach that. So like right now I'm doing a lot of teaching in the Lower Mainland at community centers, and we're teaching a lot of the group fitness instructors because they get a lot of people coming in with disabilities, and they're seeing that. So they'll be teaching, I don't know, let's say a circuit class, and they'll have some people coming in with their care aids who are on the spectrum. But then they'll kind of have someone come in with a physical disability, you know, who comes in with a walker or, you know, some type of gait dysfunction. So like that already, there's so many things happening already right there when their attention is to teach the generalized class, right? So I think the goal with that kind of thing is we don't ever want to make someone feel excluded. We definitely want to teach and portray that a class is open for everybody, unless it isn't. But you know, the goal is inclusivity. So I think a lot of it is in number one, the prep. So the individual prepping the class. So if we come in and we don't expect something like that, the teacher's going to have or the instructor's going to have a really hard time, because we wouldn't have been problem solving already for a situation like that. Because there's not a lot of time. When people teach class, I find they have 5 minutes to set up, teach, and then 5 minutes to like go to their next thing, because coaches are busy. So there really isn't, we won't always have the time to go up and ask someone what they're working with, because that's just not life, right? So I find the prep is really big. So one of the things I've been coaching the coaches to do is when they're programming on their own time for the class, they, without using the words progression and regression, they would have some alternative options throughout that circuit they're doing. So if in their head they can think, okay, let's say someone came in with a leg injury, just like really simple, basic, a lower body injury. What are some ways that they can incorporate that? And this is a good like flexibility, like adaptation skill that they can start learning when they program. And it's like flexing a muscle. They'll get better at it. But once they've done it, the day someone comes in and they have anything affecting lower body, they will already have an idea of what to do, right? And the same goes with upper body. An easy one is, let's say someone comes in and they don't have any overhead range. So for whatever, call it whatever you want, frozen shoulder, amputee, whatever. Someone cannot go overhead. So how would we program an alternative or two for that individual, right? So a lot of it is the prep and how we think right away. And that saves a lot of like time later. The other thing is, so some of those pictures in there, I did used to run a boot camp. That was all people with disabilities. You might have seen the groups in those pictures. And that is, I don't want to say it wasn't inclusive to everybody, but because of where I work, it's only people with disabilities. So it was a little bit easier for me because I'm already expecting everyone to need help with grip almost. So I put out all the grip things. I'm putting out all the dumbbells, you know, to block the chairs for people without brakes on their chairs. I'm already programming buddy work, right? Because there's only one of me and we want stations. So that's a little bit different because I'm already knowing I'm coming into with everyone having some challenge, right? So I'm already creating it to be set up for people that are all, using chairs, using scooters, right?
Mhm.
So those are the two. I hope that helps a little bit. Those are the two versions
Yeah,
that I think of.
yeah, it does help. And I think that prep is really important. And it's one of those things like I don't know of another job than teaching group classes to, to older adults, people with disabilities, just group classes in general. Like you have to be adaptable. You don't know who's
Mhm.
coming into your class, and it really
Yeah,
makes you, think on the fly. And I think that practice too is super helpful for anybody teaching group because you just have
yeah,
to, you don't know what people are dealing with when they come in, and you have to kind of be ready for anything. So that's awesome. You're doing some training with group.
yeah, yeah. It's good, and that's I think the biggest takeaway that they're wanting that I'm finding these instructors is like how can they want these people to come to their class, they want these people to
Mhm.
come back, but they also don't want to take away from the other individuals who are there and don't have challenges, and that's the hard part,
Right.
and that's where I think the language comes in. So people aren't thinking, oh, she's giving all these like regressions for other people. No, it could be for this able-bodied, I say this in quotations because able-bodied is relative, but it could be for that person too. So we say, here's an alternative. It doesn't mean it's easier. It just means this class has options because there's a ton of us in here and we all move differently. So pick whatever you want. I'm going to demonstrate this, but I'm also going to demonstrate these two. There's no progression, there's no regression. These are the options for everyone, and every single choice is right. We're all here to
Yes.
move, right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
you're so aligned with what I talk about too. It's options and how we talk about that. It's choice one, choice two, choice three. Choice one is not better than choice three. Everyone's making
Yeah.
choices that are appropriate for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It is a big, it seems like a small shift, but it really does help people, I think, feel like everybody's doing, making their own choices. And it's not like there's no value judgment of one better than
Yeah.
another. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
another
awesome.
piece to that too, this might not be applicable to some of us, but maybe it is. Maybe some of us watching this run group classes or whatever. But even a shift they started doing here in Vancouver, in one of the cities I was working in Surrey, they changed their group fitness offering from seniors 55 plus, which if somebody comes in with a disability and they're not senior, they're not going to take that class, even though it's probably perfect for them because maybe they have a balance issue or they use a wheelchair or whatever, and it is a seated class. But by labeling it 55 plus, we're excluding all of these individuals now, the 16-year-old, the 29-year-old, the 40-year-old who wants to take it. They don't take it
Yeah.
now. So they changed it to a seated exercise or the
Mhm.
chair workout, right? But we took
Right.
that label of the
Yes.
senior out, right? So that's another
Yes.
example. Yeah, makes a
Yep.
big difference.
Yes, we are aligned. I'm very big on that. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple reasons people could want a chair class, and age alone is not one of
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so okay, so we're coming up on time. I'm just going to take this last minute to, I think I can share. I'm going to replace the current share with my screen. Let me
Cool.
see.
Oh, I
Um,
think I have to stop
no,
sharing, right? You
I
got it.
took over.
Perfect.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen, correct? With
Yeah.
the, okay, because last webinar I did, I was not sharing the screen that I thought I was, and it was a little embarrassing. Okay, so next webinar is going to be in August. I'm going to be teaching it, building confidence through movement, helping participants move beyond fear. It's going to be very interactive. It's going to be best to show up live. Of course, if you show up, if you can't make the live, you will get a recording, but it's next month. And it's really talking about how we can help people be confident in their movement pattern. So it's good regardless of what you teach. We need to get people, taking challenges, and they don't take challenges unless they feel confident. And us as movement leaders can create the environment for that. And then coming up this fall, I'm super excited, Learning Lab series, 3 different learning labs, one in September, October, November. These are going to be group discussions with thought leaders in this space. So it is going to be more interactive. It's a different format that I'm trying. Again, you will get the recording, but it's best to show up live, and a new thing this fall. So check that out. They're on the website to register, and last little bit to get in touch with Agents of Movement, sign up for the newsletter. You get access to people that are doing really great things in this space. Megan's been written articles, all of our upcoming webinars, and then on social media as well. So love to stay in touch. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and I hope to see you at another webinar. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Bye, Erin.
Bye.